Let's be honest, you didn't imagine the connection. He was texting, calling, maybe even talking about the future, and then poof, he vanished. No warning, no explanation. And now, you're left in a swirl of overthinking, self-doubt, and the silent question that haunts so many smart, emotionally available women. What just happened? Here's the truth. No one's told you. It's not about you not being enough. It's not that you were too much or too interested. This disappearing act, it's a pattern, and the more we ignore it, the more it repeats. This video starts by exposing the silent epidemic that's been normalized in modern dating. The illusion of connection followed by an emotional pullback. It's not just confusing, it's disorienting. And it triggers a part of your nervous system that makes you chase what actually isn't good for you. But here's where everything shifts. Today, we're not just unpacking why it happens. We're revealing the root cause behind the vanishing act and giving you the antidote to stop it in its tracks. This isn't about getting him back. This is about getting you back. Your clarity, your confidence, your boundaries, and your ability to attract someone who won't disappear the moment things get real. So if you've ever felt the sting of someone pulling away just when you started to care, don't skip this. What you're about to hear could change everything you've believed about men, interest, and emotional availability. Let's go deeper and start rewriting your story right now. Let's talk about that early rush. The high that hits when a man first shows intense interest. You know the feeling, the way he looks at you like you're the only woman in the world. The texts that come in fast, the compliments that feel real, the way he seems so present, so into you. It's electric. You start to think, wow, this could actually be something. And you're not wrong for feeling that. You're human. That kind of attention triggers a flood of dopamine. It lights up your nervous system. You feel seen, wanted, maybe even chosen, and for a moment it feels like emotional safety. But here's the twist. A lot of that early energy, it's not actually about deep connection. It's about projection. In the beginning, he's often not seeing you. He's seeing the fantasy, the idea of you, the version of you that fits into the story he's writing in his head. You're responding to that attention, and he's responding to the validation. It's intense, but it's not grounded yet. And for emotionally immature men, this stage is addictive. It's the thrill of the chase, the excitement of possibility, the ego boost of a new connection. But once things start to move from fantasy to reality, when feelings deepen, when vulnerability enters the room, when you start showing your full multidimensional self, that high begins to fade. And if he doesn't know how to stay when the buzz wears off, he'll start pulling away. The sad part, you might take that shift personally. You might think you did something wrong, but you didn't. What you're experiencing is the gap between someone who's addicted to emotional stimulation and someone who's ready for emotional commitment. That high is not inherently bad. It's part of what makes connection beautiful. But when someone disappears after it fades, it means they were chasing chemistry, not compatibility. And that's not love. That's a rush. So here's what you need to remember. Real interest doesn't just show up fast. It stays steady. It's not all fireworks and love bombing. It's consistency. It's presence. It's choosing each other after the spark fades. Because the real magic, it's not in the high, it's in what happens after, when two people start seeing each other clearly and choose to stay anyway. So the next time someone comes in hot, don't lose yourself in the adrenaline. Enjoy it, but stay grounded. Watch what happens after the high. That's where the truth lives, and that's how you protect your heart from mistaking a rush for a relationship. That drop in energy, the shift in tone, the slower replies, the less frequent calls, the vibe that just changes. That's the moment when your gut starts whispering, something's off, and maybe it is. But before you spiral, let's talk about something most people don't break down clearly. The difference between real rejection and perceived rejection. When someone's interest fades, it can trigger a storm inside you, especially if you've ever been ghosted, overlooked, or made to feel like you had to earn someone's attention in the past. Your nervous system doesn't just register the present, it recalls the pattern. It remembers the feeling of being left behind, and it panics. Even a subtle shift can feel like abandonment. So, what happens? You start reacting, you double text, you overthink your last conversation. You wonder if you said too much or not enough. You reread old messages looking for clues. You convince yourself, I must have done something wrong. But often the problem isn't you. It's the story your mind starts telling you the moment attention feels less than what it was. Perceived rejection is tricky because it feels just as painful as real rejection. But it's not always based on facts. It's based on emotional cues that aren't always accurate. Maybe he's just distracted. Maybe life got heavy. Or maybe he's unsure of his own feelings and doesn't know how to communicate that. It's not your job to fill in the blanks, but it is your job to check your interpretation before letting it hijack your self-worth. Now, let's talk about real rejection. When someone actually loses interest and begins to disengage, that hurts. But it's also data, it's clarity. And while it's painful, it's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of alignment. Sometimes someone is attracted to the idea of connection, but when reality sets in, when they realize emotional intimacy takes effort, they back off. Not because you failed, but because they weren't equipped to show up fully. Here's the thing, emotionally mature people communicate the shift. They don't just disappear into silence and leave you questioning your worth. If someone fades and never explains, that's immaturity, not a verdict on your desirability. So how do you handle that space when interest feels like it's fading and your brain is screaming for answers? You pause, you breathe. You don't chase clarity from someone who's pulling away. You don't try to re-earn love that was freely given in the beginning. You observe, and most importantly, you ask yourself, is this a pattern I recognize? Or is this an assumption I'm making because it feels familiar? Because sometimes it's not rejection, it's redirection. And sometimes the silence isn't a loss. It's a blessing in disguise, protecting you from someone who was only ready to show up for the spark, not the substance. Let's be honest. When a man disappears, especially after showing strong interest, it feels like emotional whiplash. 1 minute he's all in, texting good morning, making plans, complimenting you like you're the best thing that's ever happened. Then, silence, distance, excuses, or worse, nothing at all. It's not just confusing, it's destabilizing. But behind the behavior, there's psychology. And understanding it doesn't excuse it, but it does give you clarity. Let's break down the 3 core reasons men disappear. The first reason, emotional unavailability. This is way more common than most people realize. Some men genuinely want connection. They crave intimacy, affection, companionship. But when things start to get real, when emotional depth enters the room, they panic. Because real closeness requires vulnerability. And if he hasn't done the internal work to feel safe in his emotions, he'll subconsciously retreat. Not because you're too much, but because emotional intimacy feels threatening to someone who never learned how to be open, honest, or emotionally regulated. In his world, disappearing feels safer than confronting his discomfort. The second reason, validation addiction. A lot of men don't even realize they're operating this way. They're not building a real relationship. They're chasing the emotional high of being desired. They love the early thrill, the text, the attention, the feeling of being wanted. But once the chase ends and things start to stabilize, the attention isn't as exciting. That dopamine hit fades. So they pull back consciously or not and go looking for the next hit elsewhere. You didn't do anything wrong. You just stopped being a new mirror for their ego. The third reason, avoidant attachment patterns. This runs deep. If he has an avoidant style, rooted in childhood dynamics where closeness felt smothering, unsafe, or conditional, he'll associate intimacy with losing control. So when he starts to care, he feels exposed. And that exposure triggers an internal shutdown. He might still like you. He might still feel connected. But the moment he senses emotional demand, even healthy ones, he retreats. It's not about you asking for too much. It's about him not knowing how to hold any emotional expectation without feeling threatened. Here's the catch. None of these reasons are about your worth. Let that sink in. A man's disappearance is not a direct measure of your beauty, value, or effort. It's a reflection of his capacity. And if he lacks the tools to navigate emotions, stay present, or communicate openly, then all you're doing by chasing him is making you responsible for his emotional immaturity. So the next time a man disappears, Ask yourself, was he truly ready? Not just ready to date, but ready to stay when things stop being easy. Because attraction is easy, but presence, consistency, emotional safety, that's the work of someone who's available, not just interested. When a man starts to pull away, the natural instinct is panic. It doesn't feel like a small thing. It feels like everything. The good mornings stop. The check-ins disappear. His energy shifts. And suddenly your mind kicks into overdrive. What did I do wrong? Did I say too much? Should I fix it? But before you make a move, pause. Because this is the moment where most women unconsciously abandon themselves trying to keep someone else close. So let's talk about what not to do. First, don't chase. That aching desire to reach out, to close the space, to pull him back in with reassurance, humor, or sweetness. It's so tempting. But chasing doesn't bring connection. It brings imbalance. The second you start working to earn what was freely given before, you step into proving mode. And love doesn't require proof. If someone's pulling away and you try harder, you teach them that distance gets rewarded with more of your energy. That's not love. That's a pattern, and it almost always leads to resentment. Second, don't overanalyze every detail. The text, the tone, the timing. This spiral is your brain trying to make sense of the emotional threat, but it won't help. Why? Because you're working with limited data. His behavior might have nothing to do with you, and everything to do with his own fears, stress, or internal blocks. Trying to decode silence only drains you. Instead, redirect your energy inward. Reflect, sure, but don't obsess. Obsession is the illusion of control. Third, don't shrink yourself. Don't become quieter, cooler, or less needy, in hopes that being easygoing will make him stay. This is one of the most damaging things women do when they feel someone slipping away. They start editing themselves. You go from being expressive to passive, from open-hearted to guarded, from emotionally available to emotionally anxious. And now you're no longer showing up as you. You're showing up as a version you hope will be easier to love. But that's not connection. That's emotional contortion. And here's one that might sting. Don't confuse his silence for your cue to prove your worth. If he's emotionally withdrawing, that's his move. Your job isn't to perform your value louder. It's to hold your value quietly, with dignity, with clarity, with the awareness that your presence is not a commodity. It's a privilege. Sometimes the best response is no response at all. Let people show you how they handle discomfort, space, and pressure. That's where you see their emotional maturity. If he comes back with accountability, great. If he doesn't, his silence gave you an answer. Because when someone pulls away, it's not your job to pull harder. It's your job to stay anchored in you. That's how you stop the cycle of overgiving and start the practice of self-honoring. Let's stop here, right in the middle of the ache, the confusion, the temptation to over-explain, overgive, and overfunction. Because this is the fork in the road. This is where you either keep chasing someone who's slipping away, or you turn around and come back home to yourself. And that's the antidote. Not making him stay, but choosing you when he doesn't. Reclaiming your power doesn't mean pretending you don't care. It doesn't mean posting something passive-aggressive or coldly cutting him off. Real power isn't loud. It's not reactive. It's rooted. It sounds like this. I deserve consistency. I honor how I feel, but I won't abandon myself to keep your attention. If you're unsure about me, that's okay. I'm not unsure about me. You reclaim your power when you stop outsourcing your worth to someone else's actions. When you stop defining your value by how interested, available, or responsive another person is. Because here's the truth. Anyone can be charming in the beginning, but your power is in discernment, in recognizing who actually shows up when it's no longer convenient to. It's not easy. Your nervous system is wired to reach out, to reconnect, to fix. But every time you resist the urge to chase and instead choose stillness, you're breaking the pattern. Every time you sit in discomfort, instead of begging for clarity, you're building internal safety. That's healing in motion. That's the antidote to every time you've abandoned yourself for crumbs of attention. Reclaiming your power also means shifting the focus back to your center. What brings you peace? What feels expansive? Who are you when you're not trying to be chosen? This isn't about pretending you didn't care. It's about remembering who you were before the pull of proving. Because that version of you, the one who knows she's worthy, soft and strong, clear in her standards, that woman is magnetic. Here's the part people don't talk about. Power doesn't always feel powerful in the moment. Sometimes it feels quiet, lonely, heavy, but long-term, it's freedom. Because the moment you stop fighting to hold someone else's attention, you create space to hold your own. And when you start showing up for yourself that way, with that kind of integrity and emotional self-respect, you don't just attract different people, you become different. You walk differently. You speak boundaries, not fear. You don't beg for presence, you expect it. And if someone can't offer that, you let them walk, not out of bitterness, but because you finally know nothing real ever requires you to betray yourself. So take a deep breath. This is not the end of your story. This is the moment you rise, not by fixing them, but by finally fully choosing you. So he's back. The message pops up out of nowhere. Hey stranger, been thinking about you. Or maybe just a casual meme like nothing ever happened. And just like that, your heart jumps. Your mind races. You wonder, does he regret leaving? Is this a second chance? What do I do now? Let's slow it all down. When a man circles back after disappearing, it can feel like validation, especially if his absence left you doubting yourself. But this is the moment where your response determines everything. Not for him, but for you. Because how you respond isn't about whether he deserves another chance. It's about whether you're still the same version of yourself that accepted crumbs, or if you've evolved into someone who refuses to shrink again. So how do you respond? First, with clarity, not fantasy. Don't rush to fill in the gaps of his silence with hope. Ask yourself, why is he reaching out now? What's different about him or about you? If you were hurting, questioning, or left in the dark before, and he returns without accountability or explanation, that's not closure, that's a convenience text. It's not your job to interpret his vague energy. If he's serious, he'll say it with consistency and honesty. Second, respond from your healed self, not your triggered one. You don't need to match his casual tone with fake chill, and you don't need to lash out either. Emotional maturity means you can hold two truths: you cared, and you also deserve more. If he ghosts and comes back acting like it's normal, it's okay to say, I've done a lot of reflection since we last spoke. I'm no longer available for half presence or emotional ambiguity. That's not rude, that's clarity. And clarity is love with boundaries. Third, make him work for re-entry, not as punishment but as proof. Disappearing has consequences. If he wants back into your space, your time, your energy, he needs to earn it. That means transparency, effort, and emotional responsibility. It means showing up for hard conversations and doing more than just checking in. If he isn't willing to have those talks, that tells you everything. And finally, you don't owe anyone access to you just because they came back. Forgiveness is personal. Reconnection is optional. You're allowed to say, I wish you well, and I've moved on. You're allowed to feel grateful for the lesson, even if it ends here. You're allowed to guard the peace you fought to rebuild in his absence. Because here's the truth. The version of you who waited, chased, or over-explained, she's not in charge anymore. The woman responding now is grounded, clear, and deeply self-respecting. And that woman knows, the real flex isn't whether he comes back, it's whether he still fits in the life you're building without him. You've made it this far, and that alone is powerful. Because awareness is everything. Awareness is what shifts patterns, rewrites stories, and interrupts cycles that once felt inevitable. And if you're here, it means you're ready to stop playing out the same painful dynamic over and over again. The hope, the high, the silence, the spiral, and start choosing differently. Let's be clear, this isn't just about men disappearing. It's about what you do with that disappearance. What it activates in you. What it brings up from your past. Abandonment, unworthiness, the ache of not feeling enough. It's about how many times you've doubted your value just because someone couldn't stay. And more importantly, it's about breaking that emotional loop for good. Because here's the pattern. You meet someone, there's a spark, he's into you, or at least seems like it. You feel hopeful, you start to let your guard down. Then slowly or suddenly, he pulls away. And instead of seeing it as a reflection of him, you internalize it. You ask, what did I do wrong? You start shrinking, chasing, overanalyzing, and that becomes the trap. But what if you shifted it? What if the next time someone pulls away, you didn't collapse inward, you expanded outward? What if their distance wasn't your cue to hustle harder for love, but your reminder to stand even taller in your self-worth? This is how the pattern breaks. You stop seeing rejection as a reflection of your value. You stop making other people's emotional unavailability your problem to solve. You stop staying in situations that require you to abandon yourself to keep someone else. And you start choosing peace over potential, self-trust over second-guessing, power over proving. Breaking the pattern doesn't mean you'll never feel triggered again. It means you'll recognize the trigger and respond differently. It means when someone ghosts, you don't spiral, you breathe. You step back, you observe, not react. You listen to your intuition instead of overriding it. You remember that your life doesn't shrink just because someone exits. In fact, their exit often expands it, because every time you honor your value, even in silence, even in heartbreak, you teach the world how to treat you. You create new standards, not from fear, but from love. Love for yourself, for your time, for your energy, for your future. So here's your final truth. The pattern ends with you, not because you hardened, not because you gave up on love, but because you finally stopped negotiating your worth in the presence of inconsistency. You deserve connection that's clear, energy that stays, love that doesn't require pain to prove it's real. This is your new baseline, not because you demanded it, but because you finally believed you're worthy of it. And from this moment forward, you don't just hope for different, you choose it. Again and again, until it's your new normal. And trust me, it will be. This journey doesn't end here. In fact, it's only just beginning. Because now that you've seen the pattern, now that you've understood the psychology, now that you've sat with the discomfort and stood back up from it, you've got something you didn't have before: awareness. And awareness without action, that's just another loop waiting to happen. So here's your next step. Stop waiting for them to act, for closure, for proof that you mattered. Instead, decide right now that your next chapter starts with you taking the lead in your own emotional life. This doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It doesn't mean you'll never feel the pull of old habits again. But it does mean you no longer ignore the voice inside you that says, this doesn't feel good anymore. This isn't love. This isn't it. Take inventory of what you've been tolerating. Look at where you've been giving your energy, your softness, your magic, and ask, are they giving it back? Or am I just hoping they will someday? Your next step might look like creating space. It might look like journaling out the patterns, the pain points, the truths you've been afraid to admit. It might mean unfollowing, muting, deleting, not to punish them, but to protect you. And if you're ready for more than emotional survival, if you're ready to actually thrive in relationships, then it's time to raise your baseline. Make peace the standard. Make clarity the norm. Make emotional maturity a requirement, not a bonus. You're not here to beg for the bare minimum. You're here to choose better, believe bigger, and walk away sooner from anything that makes you forget your worth. This isn't about making someone regret losing you. It's about never losing yourself again, trying to keep someone close. So take that step, big or small. Just move. Don't sit in the same spot, hoping they'll turn around. Choose you, fully, loudly, consistently, because the moment you stop waiting for someone else to change, you become unstoppable.